I think the first thing to say is that in the UK, we take a relatively small number of asylum seekers and refugees. At the moment, we only take somewhat under 40,000 a year arrive in the UK seeking asylum. At its peak some years ago, that was about 80,000. And I think that reflects the fact that the journey across Europe to the UK is a difficult and complicated one, and only a relatively small number of asylum seekers make that journey, and there are also several specific hazards that make it more difficult for them to get to the UK. In terms of what needs to happen, I would argue that from a mental health point of view, almost the most important thing is to bear in mind, almost to take for granted, that people seeking asylum will have been traumatised. They're likely to have been traumatised in their country of origin, and many of them will also be further traumatised on their journey. Sometimes, quite often, that trauma on the journey is even greater than the trauma that led them to leave their country of origin in the first place. For example, people who pass through Libya and are in forced labour in Libya, or are sexually tortured in Libya and are detained until more money is paid to secure their release. For example, people making the crossing into Italy or into Greece by boat in very hazardous circumstances, often nearly drowning, seeing the people around them drowning. So those journeys can be very difficult. Sometimes they can be extremely long, a matter of several years, during which people lose track of time and lose any real understanding of what is going to happen when they arrive. So by the time they get to their host country, and my expertise is around the UK, these are people who have often been very severely and multiply traumatised and have the psychiatric problems that one might expect as a result of such multiple and repeated trauma. Not only do they often have post-traumatic stress disorder, but many of them also have what is now called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, in which, in addition to their PTSD type symptoms, they also have disorders of self-regulation, such as difficulty in controlling emotions and difficulty in making and maintaining relationships, making and maintaining trust. They also very often have a very distorted and negative image of themselves and of their future. These are people in need of help and support, people who expect protection. And very often what they experience when they arrive in the UK is, instead of welcome, they receive disbelief. Instead of being given support to re-establish themselves, they are very often detained for administrative purposes. They are told that their stories do not add up, and they are told that they need to leave the UK. So those are difficult problems. People also often find it very difficult to access the medical help and the legal support that they need. They're working in a language not familiar to them. The signposting they get is extremely limited. So it's very hard for many of them to navigate the new system in which they are. In order to navigate it, they need to be given information, and they need to have understanding of a set of legal processes which is going to be very unfamiliar to them. A response to that, in practice, I think needs both the support of state services, the amount and quality of care provided by the state in terms of accommodation, housing, legal support, but also they often need and benefit from help from the charitable sector. And these are people who we identify as having multiple and complex needs, and we give them the help that I've talked about earlier in obtaining the range of supports that they need. And we also provide specific psychotherapeutic support in the way of evidence-based treatments such as narrative exposure therapy or trauma-focused cognitive behavioural therapy to help with their complex PTSD. Well, you could argue that the charities shouldn't be an answer because there shouldn't be a need for the charities because the state should be providing the support. I entirely agree with you that one of the problems is poor communication between different elements of the service, whether that be elements of the state service or care provided by charities. There is a tendency for organisations to provide one element of care but not to provide the comprehensive assessment of need and ensuring that all those needs are properly met. So communication is absolutely at the heart of providing good care. The division between health and social care is also present in the UK, although over the last few years there has been better communication between those sectors. And we also have in the UK an example of good care provided to refugees in the form of the care provided to those people who, rather than coming as asylum seekers, are identified prior to coming, are selected, if you like, as being welcome to come to the UK. The main example of that is families from Syria. And those families that come not only do not, by the time they arrive in the UK, have any problem with their immigration status, that has been sorted out in advance, but they also receive joined up care in which the local authority, primary care, and where necessary, secondary mental health or other care do communicate with each other and communicate in advance, which I think is a good way of showing that these things can be done. Sadly, for most asylum seekers, they are not done in that way. I wish I knew the answer to that. I think Brexit is certainly going to result in some changes. I mean, one obvious and likely change is that the Dublin provisions presumably are not going to apply to the UK. So people who come to another EU country and then come to the UK, what the expectation of the UK authorities is that they should be sent back to the first country they arrive at. But if the UK is out of Europe, then it is, I think, quite likely that that convention will no longer apply, and that will have a profound effect on the demands, if you like, on the asylum system within the UK. A second likely consequence, I think, is that people who have been survivors of human trafficking within Europe and who then come to the UK, because they do not have the right to return to wherever it is they came, I think there will be something slightly more complicated. And again, it is, I think, likely that demand on the UK will increase. But that remains to be seen. At the moment, we see relatively few people from EU countries who are victims of trafficking and seek refuge in the UK. I think that number is likely to increase.